All right, guys. Chapter 15 of the Papacy is the Antichrist. Antichrist exalts himself above God. To make earthly kings his vassals and earthly thrones his footstool come far short of the measure of the papal ambition. The popes have planted their foot upon the throne of God himself. That the majesty of Rome should give place to the vice Christ was but a small matter. The majesty of heaven must descend him from his seat, that the pope may mount into it. He is God, says the apostle, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. The Pope is claimed to be God first in words, second in acts. Let us listen to the words the great mouth has spoken, and also to some which his friends have spoken for him. Let us mark first where Antichrist is said to sit. He sitteth in the temple of God. This temple cannot be that of the Jews on Mount Moriah, for the apostle is speaking of an act which was to be done by one who was not to appear till after the fall of the Roman Empire. But long before the empire fell, the temple of the Jews was laid in ashes. In Acts, the Jews' temple is spoken of 25 times. In all these passages, the word used is hieron, never nous. The term here used by the apostle is nous. Christian church also Chrysostom, Augustine, and Thomas Aquinas. Christian church, as also Chrysostom, Augustine, and Thomas Aquinas. The name temple is carried over to the Christian church and is placed innumerable in the New Testament. It is used to denote sometimes an individual believer and sometimes the whole body of professing Christians. Writing to the Corinthian Christians, Paul says, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of God?" 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16. And again collectively, Jesus Christ, the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building, fitly framed together, groweth unto an holy temple in the Lord. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 20. We conclude that the temple in which Antichrist is here seen to sit is the Christian church. The interpretation preserves the unity of Paul's prophecy. Antichrist, or man of sin, was to be the outcome and head of the apostasy. The apostasy was to spring up in the Christian church, for the falling away was to be and only could be a falling away from the Christian faith. Antichrist therefore could sit, that is, establish himself and exercise jurisdiction, nowhere but in the professedly Christian church. As a vice Christ, it behooved all his visible characteristics and all his environments to be professedly Christian and ecclesiastical. This effectually disposes of all those theories of Antichrist which would find him in some powerful atheistic confederacy, or in some powerful political chief, or in other embodiment of monstrous iniquity and tyranny yet to arise, and which during a brief but terrible career should desolate the world. Such a power could in no sense be said to sit in the temple of God. It would be a power outside the temple, and so far from aspiring to office and dignity in the temple, that is, in the church, such a power must needs from its instincts and character make war on the church under the banner of open hostility and with the cry, "Raise it, raise it." Moreover, no one man Antichrist or Antichrist whose reign is to last for only 3.5 years can fulfill the conditions of Paul's prophecy. How could he spring into being, climb to a height which mortal had never reached before, exhibit his lying wonders and deceive the world, compel all its nations and kings to serve him, make war with the saints and overcome them, and all in the brief period of 3.5 years? Though the anti-Christian host had issued from the pit fully armed and mustered for battle and had spread themselves on dragon wing to the four corners of the earth, they could hardly have accomplished such a feat. The awful visitation would have been overpassed before men had well known that it had befallen. And where would have been the need for the faith and patience of the saints, or the cry, "How long?" Antichrist could not make his first appearance full grown. This would have been fatal to his pretensions as vice Christ. The first appearance of the true Christ was as an infant in the manger, wrapped in swaddling clothes. Not unsimilar must be the beginnings of Antichrist. He was working in Paul's day. He grew up and developed stage by stage, and in process of time reached his full stature, and he was not to be destroyed till the far future epoch of the glorious coming of Christ. The years of his life were to be counted in centuries. They were far to exceed the days of the life of man. They were to fill the period betwixt the time when Paul wrote, the appearance of Christ at the millennium. The system was to be presided over, and necessarily so, by a race of rulers who were to take their place in succession at its head. And as much as there was to be identity in the system from first to last, and it was to grow as man grows by regulated stages, and as much as its chiefs were to be linked together by oneness of spirit and aim, Antichrist is spoken of as a corporate individuality. The conditions of the prophecy we repeat could be fulfilled by no one man, however superhuman his power, or however stupendous his wickedness, whose rise, reign, and ruin were to be acted over in the short space of 3 years and a half. We return to the majestic counterfeit, so loftily enthroned, whom the blinded nations mistake for God, and are seen bowing in worship before him. He is God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. The Pope has claimed to be God, first in words, second in acts. Let us listen to some of the words which have come from the great mouth itself, and next to some utterances to the same effect which have fallen from some of Antichrist's friends. Sitting in the temple of God, that is, speaking ex cathedra as vice Christ, the Pope has, in the most unequivocal manner, claimed to be God. To this daring pitch of ambition and blasphemy has he carried the parallelism or imitation. The true Christ is God, therefore the vice Christ must claim to be God also. In the canon law, the Pope is called God. Decretum Gregorii the 13th, Distinct 96, Canon 7. Again, he is called Lord and God, Decretals Gregorii 9, Titus 7. And again, Innocent says in the Decretals, speaking of the Pope, God because he is God's vicar. The canon law and the Decretals are called by Romanist writers and the Pope's the Pope's oracle. They are a true expression of the pontifical mind. To the same effect, the papal casuists say, as Christ was God, he too was to be looked on as God. The Sacrum Ceremoniale has the phrase, the apostolic chair is the seat of God. The Roman Pontiff says the Decretum of Gregory, not as mere man, but as true God, reigns in the earth. Dalbu, page 581. Not to multiply instances in which the Pope calls himself God or accepts the title from others, we close by referring to a recent illustration. Sir Colin E. Smith, in a tour in Italy, found a book published 1794 with the title History of the Ancient Republic of Amalfi, dedicated to the vice god, Benedict XIII, with permission of superiors. Decretal Gregorii 173. So does the Pope bear testimony to himself. A greater than he said, if I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true. He has sought to support his claim to this great title by great deeds. Whatever God does, the Pope professes to do also. Does God require that to him every knee shall bow? So too, the Pope. He requires to be worshipped with prostration and kissing. Does God reveal himself as the only holy? So too the Pope. He claims to be styled His Holiness, or Holy Father. Is God the only wise? So too is the Pope. He claims to be inerrable. Did God plant his throne on the summit of Sinai and thence promulgate those 10 commandments which are the world's law? So too the Pope. He has planted seed on the 7 hills in the character of the world's supreme lawgiver and judge, and he claims an equal authority and infallibility for all that he is pleased to promulgate ex cathedra as Jehovah claims for the precepts of the Decalogue. Is it God's prerogative to pardon sin? The Pope assumes the same great prerogative. He pardons the sins of the living and the dead. Is it God's prerogative to assign to men their eternal destiny? This too does the Pope. He pretends to hold the keys that open and shut purgatory, and while he reserves to his followers a sure passport to the realms of paradise, he consigns all outside his church to eternal woe. In fire does God sit between the cherubim and receive the homage of his people in his sanctuary. Oh, does God? The Pope, seated on the high altar of St. Peter's while incense is burned before him, and the knee is bent to him, is invoked as the Lord our God. Romanists are accustomed to call the altar the throne of God, insomuch as thereon they place the host. The use the Pope finds for it on these occasions is the not very dignified one of a footstool. He is God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. chapter 16, man of sin and son of perdition. We have traced the parallel to its grand culmination and shown how close is the imitation in every stage of its course. The apostle adds a few touches to complete the portrait of the Antichrist, and in closing bestows a glance at the awful termination of his career. Let us rapidly survey what remains. The apostle styles him the man of sin and the son of perdition. Christ is the man of holiness, the only holy man the world ever saw. That holy thing, said the angel when he announced his birth. Thy holy child Jesus, said an apostle of him, while another wrote of him, holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners. He was typified in the Lamb of the Passover as without blemish. The Pope, or Vice Christ, is the man of sin. He has invented sin. He has taught sin. He has enacted sin, established iniquity by a law. He has traded in sin. He sells indulgences and pardons. He has grown rich through the sins of Christendom. Sin is his being, and sin is his work. Popery is as purely an incarnation of sin as the gospel is of holiness. Everything that popery touches, it converts into sin. It possesses an accursed alchemy by which it transmutes what is good unto evil. It has taken all the commandments of the Decalogue and converted them into sin. It has taken all the doctrines of the gospel and converted them into sin. It has taken all the sacraments of the church and converted them into instruments of sin. It has taken all the offices and officers of the church and made them agents of sin. It has taken all that is subtle in intellect and that is brilliant in genius and all that is noble in eloquence and used them in the service of sin. The policy of popery is not to deny the truth. It ever acts as vice Christ, as a pretended friend. Its policy is to pervert the truth, to metamorphose it, and make it fight against itself. That is not a doctrine in the Bible. There is not a doctrine in the Bible which popery does not, in appearance, admit. There is not a doctrine in the Bible which popery does not, in reality, deny, and the saving effects of which is it does not make void. It takes what is wholesome and by its infernal skill changes it into what is poisonous. The spiritual apparatus which God has set up for his own glory and man's salvation, popery has laid hold of it and works for just the opposite ends even. God's dishonor and man's ruin. It's a second and greater Jeroboam who has made Israel to sin. Verily, it is the man of sin. Paul further styles him the son of perdition, a phrase of terrible significance. It is used in Scripture only once before, and in a connection that imparts to the phrase an awfully tragic meaning. It is applied to Judas, after the devil had entered into him, and so worked upon him, that he rested not till he betrayed his master. The first son of perdition went forth from the bosom of the infant church, where he had just partaken of the Passover cup. He rose up from the very presence of God, the God-man, to enact his awful apostasy. The second greater son of perdition, in like manner, arose in the bosom of the primitive church. Satan having entered into him, his ambition began to burn, and he went forth to the princes of the world and said unto them, What will ye give me, and I will betray Christianity unto you? Manifestly ye are not able to overthrow it. It has taken root and is filling the earth, despite your armies and your edicts. The fires of 10 persecutions have blazed around it, but all in vain. The bush has burned, yet it is not consumed. You are laboring at a work beyond your power. If Christianity shall ever know extinction, its overthrow must come from within. It must come from myself and no other. Give me my hire. Give me the seat of Caesar. Give me the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. And I will go forth and show myself to man as the vice Christ, and the world will believe on me and follow me. Where your forces failed, my craft will triumph. The policy was astute as deep. Need we say who was its prompter? Paul makes this point clear. The coming of the man of sin, he has said, was to be after the working of Satan himself. The head of the apostasy was the energized, prompted, sustained, and led on by Satan, the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil. Popery is the son of perdition, the spawn, the offspring of Apollyon the destroyer, and it must needs do its father's work. As it is God's work to create, so it is Satan's work to destroy. The fair fabric of nature he would if he could destroy. The moral constitution of society he has so far destroyed. His name is Apollyon the destroyer, and the work of popery is the same. The principles of morality and evangelic Virtue in man it destroys. The principles of renewing power in the gospel it perverts and destroys. Wherever it has found a seat in Europe, there is the blackness of perdition. Ignorant men, moldering cities, and enslaved and demoralized nations. Apollyon the destroyer has passed this way, we exclaim. Here are his footsteps. All along his track is the blackness of physical, moral, and spiritual death. We think of the pale horse. His name that sat on him was Death. Hell followed him. It's funny how everybody considers honesty a virtue, yet nobody wants to hear the truth. Oh, sorry, this is not. Chapter 17. Antichrist is doomed. If a son, then an heir. And what is the inheritance of which he is the heir? It is perdition. The kingdoms of the world and the glory of them first. Perdition in the end. It was written of him before he arose, he goeth into perdition. Better to have had the bitter first and the sweet after, but no. The day of his glory, over and past, there comes the voice. Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime had thy good things, and Lazarus his evil things. Now thou art tormented. This inheritance is conveyed to the papacy in the same charter and made sure to it under the same seal as the glory that goes before it. The King of Heaven has made this decree and sealed it with his own signet. The decree may no man change. As sure as the papacy has had its glory, so surely shall its doom come. Paul, before closing his prophecy, pauses, and in solemn and awful words foretells the night of horrors in which its career is to end. That wicked, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8. There is here a dual destruction suspended above Antichrist. A slow wasting first, for it may be centuries, and a sudden and utter extinction in the end. This duality in the doom of Antichrist has been noted in prophecy ever since its beginning. It is emphasized by Daniel, speaking of the little horn, which had a mouth speaking great things, eyes like the eyes of a man, a look more stout than his fellows, and which made war with the saints, and was to have dominion over them, until a time, times, and the dividing of time, that is 1260 years, the prophet says, the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and destroy it unto the end. Daniel chapter 7, verse 26. Another proof, by the way, of identity betwixt the little horn of Daniel and the Antichrist of John. In the predicted doom of the papacy, there are thus two well-marked stages. There is first a gradual consumption, and there is second, a sudden and terrible destruction. The consumption, a slow and gradual process, is to be effected by the spirit of his mouth, by which we understand the preaching of the gospel. This consumption has been going on ever since the Bible was translated, and the gospel began to be preached at the Reformation. Men have begun to see the errors of popery. Its political props have been weakened, and in some instances struck from under it, and its holding generally on the nations of Christendom has been loosed, and thus the way has been prepared for the final stroke that will consummate its ruin. Great systems like popery, with their roots far down and spread wide out, cannot be plucked up while in their vigor without dislocating human society. They must be left to grow ripe and become rotten, and then the final stroke may be dealt them with safety to the church and the world. When that hour shall come, then will the second part of the doom of the papacy overtake it. The Lord shall destroy it with the brightness of his coming. The form of the judgment is left vague, but enough is said to warrant us to conclude that it will be swift and final. It will come with lightning flash. Its holy vengeance will be so manifest that, to use the figure in the prophecy, it will irradiate both heaven and earth with immortal splendor. Whether Christ shall then come as he came at the period of the flood, and as he came at the burning of Sodom, and again at the destruction of Jerusalem, when he himself remaining on the throne of heaven, he girded the ministers of his wrath and sent them down to earth to execute his vengeance on the ungodly. Or whether, leaving his seat in glory, he shall in very person descend and confront his vicar, whether he shall return to close the apocalypse in divine magnificence in which he appeared to John in Patmos, when he came to open it, as it is not necessary that we should here decide. Enough that this day of wrath will be unspeakably great, and will rank as one of the greatest days of vengeance that have been on the earth since the foundation of the world. Paul dispatches it in a single sentence. John expands it into a whole chapter. And in what other chapter of the Bible or of human history is there such another spectacle of judgment, such another picture of blended horrors, of awestruck consternation, of loud and bitter wailings, and cries of woe, as in the 18th chapter of the Apocalypse? The kings of the earth shall bewail her, and lament her, when they shall see the smoke of her burning. standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, for in 1 hour is she made desolate. But this dark scene has one relieving feature. It is a scene that will not need to be repeated, for it will close earth's evil days and begin the hallelujahs of the nations. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus, with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. Revelation chapter 18, verse 9. Revelation 18, verses 9 through 19 and 21. Most people, including ourselves, live in a world of relative. This is chapter 18. Does not the likeness fit? Let the reader remember that the portraiture he has been studying is not ours, but Paul's. And when he lifts his eyes from the picture, let him cast them around and try if he can discover the original of this likeness. The features are so vividly depicted, so sharply cut, that surely there can be no difficulty in detecting him whose image they present. Paul did not paint at random. He is no vague sketch which may fit loosely any or most of the systems of error which have arisen in the course of the ages. When we read this prophecy, we have the overwhelming impression that Paul has in his eye some one grand, sharply featured, long-lived, daringly wicked, fearfully blasphemous confederacy, which, under the mask of friendliness, was to wage undying war against the gospel. We are blind indeed if we cannot find the original of Paul's portraiture. Here is one who has erected his throne in the Christian temple, who has usurped all the titles and functions of Christ, who has professed to mediate between God and man, to hold the keys of heaven and hell, to do great wonders and make fire come down from heaven, who has changed laws, spoke great words, forbidden to marry, commanded to abstain from meats, has clothed his priests in purple and scarlet and fine linen, decked with gold and precious stones, one who has made war with the saints and been drunk with the blood of martyrs, who has put his foot on the neck of kings, nay, has clothed himself with the robe of the eternal King, infallibility even. In fine, one who has said, I am vice Christ, I am vice God. We go up to this man, and we say to him, Thou art the Antichrist. Let who will cringe and bow before thee, let who will patch anew this visor which begins to wax threadbare and to permit the horrid features that lurk beneath it to shine through. Let who will palliate thy crimes and palliate thy crimes, and deny that ever thou didst persecute those simulating the meekness and innocence of the Lamb, art a ravening wolf. Let who will befriend thee in the arrogant and blasphemous claims that thou art still putting forth, we say of thee, thou art he of whom Paul in old time, writing by the Holy Ghost, spoke. Hear what he called thee. He named thee the man of sin, the son of perdition. And that is the end of The Papacy is the Antichrist by James Aitken Wylie. And if you want to purchase it, I highly recommend get it for yourself, put it in your hands. I purchased mine and I got it off of Amazon. Somebody reprinted it. And I don't see it on here. Papacy's Antichrist. Yeah. Let's see if it comes up like this. Those might be good prints, those other prints, but anyways, let's go. This is, I got the thrift books. So this is the one I got, and it had the original reprinting, not this updated text, but it had reprinting imaging from the original publishing of it. So highly recommend get it for yourself, read it, have your hands. It's a great work. It's a great work. Thank you.